Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. It is day 2 of Service Week. I was going to call it Sacrifice Week, but no, it is Service Week. So I really appreciate we have Dutch, we got Chris, we got Seb. It's going to be an awesome conversation. We will be talking sacrifice. Now, while I am getting all kinds of flustered because of timing issues, y'all shouldn't be. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff so you can get your emails in the morning when we go live, which is, of course, every day. And as a heads up, tomorrow morning, in Canada at least, we'll be going at 05:30 PST. It's going to be an early morning here in Canada, and it'll be nighttime over in Malaysia for Shaun as he does his third of that of tomorrow, of today. I'm not even sure what day you're on, but
I don't even
you're
know where I
somewhere.
am right now. Future,
So,
the past, it's hard to say.
it could be somewhere. With that, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section. We will engage those directly throughout the show. Today's topic, like I said earlier, service and sacrifice. So I have a definition of sacrifice that I want to hit first, and then we'll dive into the rest of the conversation. So sacrifice is a noun. The act of offering something to a deity in propitiation or homage, especially the ritual slaughter of an animal or a person. Also, a victim offered in this way, or the act of giving up something highly valued for the sake of something else considered to have greater value or claim. So, with that, let's go around the table and see what you guys think. Seb, I'm going to start with you. What do you think of when I'm talking about sacrifice?
Yeah, I really like the line about sort of relinquishing something of value for something perceived as of greater value, because especially in our realms and in our field of endeavors, that means life, and it can be, this is not to be understated. If that's a decision that you're gonna make, you better have your why dialed in, because evidently we've all suffered the cost of that, and we know that it reverberates through other people. So it's not just a person making the decision to accept the possibility of a sacrifice or to engage in endeavors that may lead to a sacrifice, but it's everybody around them also that are going to be by proxy affected by the decision. And so I guess the question I have for the panel, for myself, for everybody is, why is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing? And it better be extremely clear in my own mind, because the day that things don't go the way they should, I need to be able to look at myself and say that was the right thing to do. I need to be able to look at my kids and say that was the right thing to do. And yeah, that's my sort of the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of sacrifice in our context.
Absolutely. Chris, what were you thinking?
Yeah, so my definition of sacrifice is slightly different. I steal Ayn Rand's, I guess, interpretation of sacrifice, where she describes sacrifice as offering something of greater value in exchange for something of lesser value. If you are offering something of greater value or something of value for something of greater value, that's actually an investment.
Makes
And
sense.
so like looking back, like look at Michael Phelps, like the most decorated, Olympian ever. Was he sacrificing all those potential parties he could have gone to and drinking and stuff like that? Was he sacrificing that, or was he investing in himself to achieve something of greater value? In kind of like our circle, the term sacrifice comes up often because it's like, what are you willing to lay down for your brothers or your country? And I don't know. I see it as like, yeah, I'm willing to invest my life in order to allow others to live if it ever came to that. You know what I mean? So I just kind of view it a little differently, I suppose.
Absolutely. Dutch, what are you thinking?
First of all, anybody who's going to start off with talking about Ayn Rand is you're on the close people list that you need to talk to. So that's awesome. Yeah, I also think the context said hit it right on the money. It's what our context. I mean, we're not talking about the sacrifice where we're throwing babies into the fire to the god of Moloch. That's not the sacrifice we're talking about here. We are talking about more of a Phelps Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, and then a soldier type, because those kids do sacrifice without a doubt. If you look at Mr. Beckham's story, without a doubt, there are times, just like a soldier, an athlete will sacrifice most of his life, most of his young life. Kids don't, hey, I want to go to the store, just ride your bicycle down the store or play in the creek. But no, Tiger Woods with his father, or these guys, Beckham's father and his journey. You're out on the pitch all the time, doing your thing. Woods was on the course all the time, doing his thing. So it is an interesting way to put that. But we as soldiers, obviously, I think it's awesome. You have to know, right? You have to know going in, this could be, the ultimate sacrifice. What does Abraham Lincoln say? It's the last full measure of devotion to your friends, to your family, to your country. That's not verbatim, mind you, but it's very close. But it is the last full measure of devotion. And that's the sacrifice that I think that we're talking about, whether it's Ayn Rand's or William F. Buckley's gratitude or something like that. Not necessarily the athlete, but although he does give up pieces of his life to be excellent, because it's often hard, right? And I just did another podcast with another organization called Tactical Hive, and we talked about the consequences of this time. How long have you spent? And every day you're willing to sacrifice. Chris just mentioned it. What's a protector mindset? He just mentioned. We are prepared to protect ourselves, our loved ones, and others around us. To be left alone, to be on the correct side of the blue line if I was a law enforcement officer, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, sure, I do. I thought we had a pretty great conversation yesterday on the podcast with Mike. He was just smashing it out of the park with this aspect of service and sacrifice. And I think generally speaking, we established that to serve, you have to sacrifice yourself to a greater cause with no expectation of any gain or no expectation of anything coming back to you. That's truly selfless service and selfless sacrifice. I think if we look at the selfless aspect and then dial it all the way back to selfish, now I'm going to make my point. I'm going to talk about 3 what seemingly are disparate instances, but I'm going to try to tie them together over a 24-hour period that they occurred. So I just came out of Australia, where I was serving 2 national athletes from Canada who were racing in a 24-hour solo mountain bike race. The sacrifices that I made and my wife made to do that are not insignificant. And the same goes for those athletes. The sacrifices that they made to be in that point are not insignificant. As we left them behind, I was thinking about that and how we serve, maybe in our careers, but we also can serve in our personal lives. When I got to the airport here, just about 10 minutes ago, I was quickly scanning through my DMs before I realized that we were just about to go live. And I just got a little DM from someone called Simon, and you don't need to know his last name. And he'd sent me a little bit of verbiage. And what he'd asked, or what he did, was position what he'd just kind of gone through in university during one of his courses, where the debate was the worthlessness or the incorrect moment in our modern time of the poppy. The class was arguing that the poppy is a thing from the past and it isn't relevant today. And so he asked me, Shaun, what is your opinion on this? Like, I was trying to defend the poppy and I was trying to defend what I think it means. And I'm not sure I got it right because I got so much pushback. And so how I described it to him was, listen, Simon, I wish I could have been there, but I'll just give you my opinion on what it should mean to everyone. The problem is everyone hasn't served or sacrificed enough to understand what I'm about to say. So if you think that when you go up to Starbucks and you're served a coffee, that your sacrifice is there's not enough creamer in the jug and somehow you deal with it, that is not service and sacrifice. And I think a lot of the society nowadays doesn't understand the difference between their personal and their external sacrifices. There's a lot of people in the world that are on their one-way trajectory, their solo lives, that are oblivious to the needs of their fellow man. They're only aware of their own selfish needs. So how can you frame service and sacrifice if all you're looking for is better service in your coffee shop? And where's my freaking extra creamer? I'm sacrificing in the moment right now. Where's my creamer? I think that it's a skewed perspective in society right now because a lot of society has never made the sacrifices to a degree where they understand what this entire conversation is going to be about today.
That is a very good point. I got a couple comments here, and then we're going to carry on. So keep that thought here. Tim jumps in here. Good to see you, Tim. And he says 0530. Oh, it's a letter. You're absolutely correct. It is 0530 tomorrow for sure. He then carries on. He says, sacrifice is dedication to perfecting a skill set in the profession of arms, from training to kinetic action, the military law enforcement role, but overall sacrifice can be applied to anything from family to sports. And I totally agree. In the question, I guess I have a small snippet of a story here, but today my wife is going to be picking up my son from school, and she's speaking of picking up a friend of ours' son from school and dropping them off at her house just to make her life a little bit easier. She's going to be sacrificing a bit of her time and a bit of her capability to bring a friend of ours' child home. Now, that's not a huge sacrifice, right? It's not of the same magnitude that we're talking about in terms of military and law enforcement, but I think also what we were talking about yesterday was the fact that sacrifice is it's a lifestyle, right? Service is a lifestyle. So for her, it's not a question of any reciprocity, like, oh, well, I'm going to pick up this kid on Tuesday and they're going to pick him up on Friday, and none of that. It's just my friend needs help, so I'm going to help her, and I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of my time to do it. And I think that goes into what you're saying, Shaun, is that there's a large majority of people in the world that have never experienced that lifestyle, at least in my view on it. Dutch, I'm going to come to you. What do you think about it?
Well, I think a lot of things, but I get goose flesh listening to Shaun talk about it. So this idea of hard work, stronger families, you see what's going on now in the world today, more selflessness, less service. So, if you look at the biblical worldview, we are commanded to shine the light, right? As we continue on through our life, even if you're of secular nature, right? It's better to interact with other people and to make them better. It creates a better environment for civilized people to live in, right? But you're exactly right. This whole idea that they don't know, they're not made aware. Whether they haven't been schooled on the concept, or they just, nowadays there's everybody carries $1,000 computer with them in their hand. I told somebody the other day, I said, consult the Oracle you have in your pocket. What are you talking about? Look, you can get any information you want for the most part. Hopefully it's not suppressed or changed by some government attitude, but most often you can find as much as you want to in a little pocket of your trousers. And it's an instant coffee. You mentioned Starbucks. I should have this stuff. It's instant. I deserve it. I'm a big deal. No, it's not how we should go about our lives at all.
Absolutely. Seb, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm still reeling, kind of over what Shaun said about the overall attitude that we have going on here. And at the end of the day, I mean, you're seeing it now. There's so many people walking around that see everybody else as accessories to their lives, and thank you for being a part of my life and being there waiting for me around the corner so that you may fulfill that one thing that you're here for, kind of thing. And I think that those days are numbered, man. Like, I think that the days of people not knowing the value of sacrifice are going to come to an end. And I think they're going to come to an end abruptly. And I'm not launching into some sort of conspiracy thing or whatever, but it's just a byproduct of going down the route that we're going down now and having no respect for anything really, but mostly for the story and the history of the people that, sacrifice it all so that we may have these opinions, so that we may be able to have the freedom that we enjoy. And I think we're being disconnected and so far away from conflict that we got extremely comfortable, and that comfort is now dissociated from the source. Like, why are we discomfortable? Like, we have lost sight of that, and we're creating all kinds of issues that we're, swimming in. And it's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think we need to hit that rock bottom to see that. But in the meantime, what can we, sort of the rest of us, make sure that we, continue to act the way we should? So it would be easy to kind of fold and be like, well, nobody cares anyway about anybody else and all of those things. And I think the best way for us to proliferate sacrifice is to continue doing it regardless of who is. And if you're truly doing it for selfless reasons, then you're not concerned about who's giving you reciprocity or who's, starting on a journey of sacrifice or any of that, because that's none of your concern. Your concern is, what am I doing for the collective and what do I bring to people around me? And when I first had my interview to be a cop, they asked me, like, what do you want to do? And I basically said, like, I'm not here to change the world, but I won't let the world change me. And I still stick to this quote to this day. I do believe that there is extreme value in continuing to do that. As these guys are more and more lost, there is going to be a turn of the tide at some point. But in the meantime, the rest of us need to keep doing what we're doing for the reason why we're doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Chris, thoughts?
Lots of thoughts. First, maybe Shaun should be late every day because he was on fire in that opening statement. Maybe the added stress of running behind is lit a fire under
I think
his butt.
he is late every day. So,
yeah, I think, at the risk of overgeneralizing, but I think most people navigate life, and the biggest story that they've invited themselves into is themselves. And what a boring story, what a boring adventure, whereas if you can look outside of yourself and see how great things could be, and devote yourself to something like that is a good story. And that unfortunately is, I think we're seeing it fewer and farther between. Not as many people are interested in engaging in a story that's bigger than them, or maybe they just don't know how to find it. Maybe deep internal, we all want to be a part of something bigger than us, but we just don't know how to find it. And so we dig into the social media, which is an interesting way to phrase it, like social media, but it's actually, I think, isolated us more than ever. Because we're not engaging with community and tribe as much as we used to throughout human history. When we were out on like the Savannah Plain, it was a very intimate community. I mean, it was live or die by the tribe, right? And you knew everybody because they were essentially family, whether blood related or not. And that isn't required of us anymore. One can navigate life totally in isolation and survive until the end of their life, and it's unfortunate if they allow themselves to engage in that story for their whole lives. That was a whole lot of word vomit. I don't know if it made much sense, but
oh, hey, brother, listen, what you just said, that may be a plan. I mean, Seb said no conspiratorial thinking. A lot of these conspiratorial thoughts that we've had recently have become conspiratorial facts. And this whole idea that, yes, sir, you're exactly right. These people, some of these people, put quotes in those people, they want you to stay in isolation. They want you to be part of a VR world. They want you to live in a city where it takes 15 minutes to go everywhere you want to go. They want you to own nothing and like it.
that is an interesting thought. I kind of like where we're going with this, and I'm gonna shift it just a little bit because I think this is a key point that we're hitting on. So my brother hit me with a word a little while ago, and it was sonder, and that it's defined as the realization that each random person is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. And that blew me away because I was like, well, of course they are. Why wouldn't they be? They're all human beings, right? And he's like, no, this is like there are swaths of people that have absolutely zero concept that other people have just as large and vast lives as their own. And I wondered if that has to do with the fact that, you know, back in the day, as you were saying, Chris, you had to leave your community in order to seek more, right? If you were okay living your community life and, you know, you grew up and you were a farmer and you lived in that community your whole, I look at my uncle who's been a rancher his whole life, and he's cool with that. That's his life. He enjoys it every step of the way. But some people, they seek more. They want to see more. They want to do more. They want to expand their knowledge within the universe. And I think that might be the tipping point, right? That there are some people that just don't even realize that other people are other people, if that makes any sense. Shaun, you got any thoughts on it at all?
I do. Just 2 points and we'll see where it goes. So first things first, out on the Savannah Plains, you know, let's say there's a clan of 20 people, and within that clan, they all have their roles and responsibilities. If you're old and fragile, you're not grabbing a spear and going out on the hunt. If you're young and eager, you're going out on the hunt. When you come back from the hunt, the older, fragile person is looking after the kids or stoking the fire or doing whatever. Everyone has their roles and responsibilities. But I think the reality is that back then, if you weren't pulling your weight within the clan, there was freaking consequences. Nowadays, if someone doesn't get a 15-minute nap, it's considered a sacrifice. But back there on the Savannah Plains, if you wanted a 15-minute nap, you know what was going to happen? I'd be poking you with the tip of my spear and saying, wake up, you dummy. Watch the fire while I'm going out to feed you. That's how it used to work, man. And so there's a selection process on the Savannah Plain. There isn't a selection process now. Everyone gets to have a nap. You don't have to serve. And the sacrifice is, I'm a little sleepy. So that's where we've come from the Savannah Plains to today, where there's a complete misunderstanding of what it means to serve and to sacrifice your fellow man. It wasn't too long ago that we really, really understood it. Now it's pretty distorted. So the second piece I would say is, I'm looking at this panel right now, and I'll include myself in it, that my own family doesn't know my sacrifices. My own family doesn't know a lot of my backstory. I don't tell them a lot of things from back in my day stuff. You guys would understand it far better than my family understands it, because my family hasn't sacrificed like all of us have. They haven't served like all of us have. I'm not throwing my family under the bus. They're freaking awesome. I try to help them understand these things through a construct or through a philosophy or through a theoretical model, that then I try to engage them, particularly my son, so that I can raise them up to be good men, so that they can understand this conversation. But let's not make any mistakes. You can't really understand this thing through a book, through a story, through a movie, through a quick word over your shoulder. It's got to be felt. The sting has to be felt. And the sting is not just a blip. It takes years and years and years of sacrifice to understand sacrifice. It takes years and years and years of service to understand what service is. It's not a one and done. It's not a weekend course. It's a lifestyle that builds on itself until you can freaking spell the word sacrifice.
Bam. Shaun is on fire. Seb, I'm going to come to you. Got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just the one thing. I wouldn't consider it pushback, but I would consider it like an alternative angle, just on the side of the family piece, right? Like, I think that our families are, those that were around when we sacrificed everything. They definitely know what the sacrifice they made to have us leave every single family function, being called out, doing, going to dangerous places, having the potential to lose their loved ones, all of those things. And, sometimes when you're a kid and your brain is not fully developed and your consequential thinking isn't even lined up properly, and now you're already dealing with the prospect of losing one of the persons that you love the most, on account of what they're doing for the collective. I do believe that families in general that are families of people that have sacrificed tremendously are very capable of understanding the nature of sacrifice, unless, of course, they were born and raised after everything was done. So if your service was done, but even without the service, because we bring everything back to service, just de facto, because of who we have on the panel. But the reality of it is, this could be a mom fighting cancer. This could be anything. This could be anyone. But yeah, this is just my initial thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Chris, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you guys are all way smarter than I. So I'm gonna you guys are on fire today. So but yeah, I think kind of to maybe Shaun's point from earlier is, people think that, missing their nap or not having enough creamer in their Starbucks drink is the sacrifice. But maybe that's because we don't expect enough of people today. We live in such comfort because, and rightfully so, we've evolved as a society and as a people, which is great, and we should continue to push that evolution. But I don't think we should lose that expectation of one another. Going back to the savannah, like Shaun said, everybody had a role, and everybody was expected to fulfill that role. And when they didn't, there were consequences. Whether if you fell asleep, maybe the saber-toothed tiger attacked camp, and you didn't give enough early warning, or whatever the case is. Whereas now it's like, kind of like what I said earlier, is like you can kind of navigate life by yourself if you wanted to, and nobody expects anything of you, but I think in order to maybe reinstill that sense of service within our society, we should expect more of one another.
I think that's absolutely right. Dutch, you got any thoughts?
100%. We should expect more of each other. So we should teach those people. So that's what the Warrior Ethos Leadership Program stuff is like. This is what we do as the collective. Listen to what we're saying, and just grab it, right? It's a tool in the tool bag, but listen to what we're saying. Teach your children well, right? So we're coming up on the 11th month of the 11th hour, the 11th day, right? We're coming up on when you talk about poppies, you talk about Simon and his struggle, Shaun, in the school. Do most children even know? So if how do I put it? So if we think that everyone owes the debt of gratitude, if you go to William F. Buckley's book called Gratitude, which I think is fantastic, and I think everyone does owe a debt of gratitude. I felt it so much that I wanted to join the service. I wanted to be part of my life. But even if a civilian knows that because of history says so, because we know that these people made sacrifices long before I ever got here, and I just want to honor those people, right? So then those people need to know that they have a debt. And I think there's so many young people today that have no idea that they have a debt. And I think they want to be away from that too, right? That's almost a consequence. It's almost a consequence of doing good, right? Or I want to do whatever I want, right? Because I'm a big deal. And oh, by the way, I don't worry about that because it's not part of, it's not me. But the things that have been created, as Chris just said too, right? We've created this world. We, men like us, have created this world, and women have created this world in which we can do just about anything we need to, anytime we want, anywhere we want. Hey, DoorDash. Hey, Uber. Hey, Xbox games, whatever. I don't know. Stuff like that, right? It's an instant world, and you can get any information you want at the tip of your fingers. Man, come on. So I think there's a whole lot of folks that just don't understand that they even owe a debt.
I really like this concept of the debt, and I have a couple comments here I just want to touch on before we get into the debt portion of this. And Dead Wrong, first off, good to see you. I've never seen you on here, so awesome to have you. He says, hello, sacrifice and losing something that someone gains from are different concepts that can be confused as well. And I think this is a great point in the fact that, you can sacrifice or you can just lose something. And those are two very different things. But also carries on, or are they? Which I think is another good question. Carries on to say, sacrifice is centered around what you work towards giving, not what you lose in the process. And I think that is a fantastic point. So I just wanted to put those out there before we carry on this concept of debt. So my question for you is then this, and I heard this, I was watching a video on Instagram earlier, and it was asking mothers, would you kill for your children? And most of them were shocked by the answer, like by the question just in general. Most of them, if you asked them, hey, would you die for your kids? They would be absolutely 100%, and like no hesitation whatsoever. But would you kill for your children? The video went on, and it showed a picture of Tim Kennedy going like, you have no idea the depths I would go for my kids, right? Which it's a level of intensity above. But the real question I ask people, especially when they say, I'd die for my kids in a heartbeat. The question is, would you live for them, right? Would you live every day doing the things that you know you're supposed to do so that your kids can understand the sacrifice, understand the things that you're trying to do? And so I ask you guys this question: would you kill for your kids, and would you live for your kids? Dutch, I'm going to come back to you first. What do you think?
Well, you come to me first. Thanks very much for that. 100%. Throughout my life, I told my children I would fall on a sword for them no matter what, as long as they're correct. As long as we're correct, as long as we're talking about things that are right. The kid gets into a fight at school. I told him, you can fight at school. Yes, you can. But only if you're protecting someone else who's weaker, or someone is bullying them, or whatever it might be. And sure enough, got in a fight, got suspended. It's okay with me. I'm all right with it. As long as you're correct, I'll certainly go to bat for you the whole way. And certainly as a protector, and the protector's mindset, which is sadly slightly ironic right now in my position, but I would die for my kids, and I would kill for my children as well.
Absolutely. Seb, what do you think?
I think I'd be hard pressed to find anybody on this panel that's already not. I'm surprised Shaun isn't digging a hole right now as we're speaking. The answer goes without saying, but I really like what you said about would you live for them? Because that's something that at some point there has to be a conversation, about the priorities of life when it comes to something happening to your kids, and you having to make it a strategic decision on what you're going to do next. Right? Because, and this is something that I've experienced recently where, my oldest daughter reached in for something that happened to her. And when I looked at the possibilities of what my reaction was going to be to that, I needed to factor in the fact that she needs me to be around. So I can launch on all kinds of, black ops and all kinds of things in the context. But what I needed to do was, how can I problem solve this so that I can resolve this issue and be here for her? Because one of those things make it that I likely won't be, right? And I think that's the part that's often forgotten. And so in this case, the sacrifice could be sacrificing your true desire for what you know is right that you need to do in the context. And so that also is a sacrifice, And so for me, would we kill if we were pushed to, and all these other things? Yes, we all know that that's not even an issue, and it never going to be an issue with people in our line of work, or people that have done the things that we have done. But the people that are out there right now are living a sanitized version of life. Like, it is absolutely sanitized. And let me qualify that slightly. So imagine this. We all heard about the Titanic, and the tragedy that surrounds the Titanic, and we all can have conversation. I'm not talking about the little dinghy that went there, with some rich people on board, which is tragic too, but definitely talking about the real thing. But if you ask everybody that's ever heard it, just, have you ever considered what that water must have felt like at 1 a.m. in the morning, or 1:55 in the morning in April in that part of the world? Like a million knives going through your skin. You're not trained. You're not Wim Hof. You're not, any of those things. And so if you start questioning the way you look at reality, and if you start going layers deeper, you can really paint a picture of how things are, or how things were, because you've been exposed to a sanitized version of it. But I need you to engage all of your senses and go down, this path where you hear the same story all over again, but this time you really try to live it. You really try to feel it. You really try to smell it. And yeah, we're going to always get the argument that if you've never done any of those things, you might have a hard time doing that. But that attempt at doing it is going to bring you closer to reality than where you are now, and therefore engage your sense of gratitude a little bit more. We have completely lost what it means to do anything in this world, as far as I can tell. And that is a big problem. And that's what's creating a lot of disconnect between us as well. And that's what's creating me thinking that my situation is completely isolated from the next person, whereas I can throw a rock anywhere and somebody has suffered an equal, if not worse, predicament than mine.
That is a great point. Chris, you got any thoughts?
So I've got 2 daughters, and my oldest one is a lovely young lady, and she is at the age where boys are interested in her. And I tell her often that, Sweet Pea, I would die for you, but I would also go to prison for you. So let the boys know. Yeah, without hesitation, I would kill or die for my girls. But kind of to the main question, am I willing to live for them? And something I try to remind myself all the time is that I am the standard by which they measure men. And that requires me to strive for excellence in all areas. Being obese is unacceptable. I just can't afford to do that, because I am not then modeling what an appropriate partner for my girls should be. Being broke isn't acceptable. Striving for success in my business is important, because again, that is the model that they are seeing, whether they are really paying attention or not. That's what they are seeing. And same with having emotional intelligence or mental acuity. Like, trying to make myself smarter in all areas of life is super important. And I like to think that I do it for myself, just because it's important to want to grow as an individual. But my girls are very good motivation to keep me striving for the standards that I should be striving for.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
I think, like everyone on the panel, it goes without saying that I would kill for my kids, I would die for my kids, and I will live for my kids. And so that living part, that trying to do better, as Chris said, is us leading by example. Not what we expect of ourselves, but what we expect of our future generations. I mean, if we don't expect more of our little clan, then the Savannah crew is already dead. I mean, we're built on the backs of people who were on that Savannah trying to live just one more day to survive through the winter, to put us here in front of these microphones. The sacrifices that they made, we never think about those things. Often when we talk about we all stand on the shoulders of giants, we go to the near future. Society as a whole doesn't go back to the Savannah Plains and realize the brutality of what our forefathers had to go through just to freaking live another day. They were serving us, but we don't see it because it's not wrapped in ceremonies and parades and medals and F-16 shooting across in the background. Those are all relevant moments as well. But the mundaneness or the almost insignificant or inconsequential history of just a clan surviving another winter is often forgotten. But they were making the greatest sacrifices of all, because it was a Titanic every freaking day. And so it's a hard conversation to have and not disrespect the Titanic. But contextually, times were tough back in the day, and contextually today, they are not. And so I think that one of our jobs as we'll call leaders or warrior ethos, or whatever we're representing at this moment that is different than the general population, it's our job to live a better life and demonstrate to others the importance of it through these kind of conversations. And so now I'm going to direct my focus to, there's members within veteran first responder and Leo communities that are struggling right now in living their best lives, because I think that they don't see the importance of demonstrating how much they want to live for their own family, how much they want to live for 1,000 years from now. Because 1,000 years from now, I mean, someone like us should be saying something along the lines of, man, I get that you didn't get your creamer at Starbucks, but you remember that time 1,000 years ago? I mean, that's how we should be framing up time, as far as I'm concerned.
I really like that. I got an interesting point made by Dead Wrong here in a second, but I'm going to put it up in a minute. I like your point, standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think the piece that we forget too often is the fact that we stand on the shoulders of dead giants. Right? It's not just that there's an image of, standing on the shoulder and they're standing too, and they're standing on shoulders and all the way down. But it's you're literally standing on a pile of corpses over time. When you really stop and think about it, is that each small sacrifice through the time period, through the eons of time, allows us to make it a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And I always say, I want to give my kids a little bit more opportunity than I had, and just give them a little bit more. That way they can move up the socioeconomic law. I can't even talk right now. Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. Move up the ladder in any regard. And I think that is something that, again, we kind of forgotten. So the question I want to ask you guys is, how do we get them to see? Like, just recently I did a talk at a school, talked to a bunch of kids, told them about sacrifice. I told them about, times in Afghanistan. I talked about my friends that aren't here anymore. They seem to kind of get it, but they're still very young. They don't have the experience to really put those things together. I'm going to be talking to another school on Friday. How do we get that across without obviously traumatizing young kids, showing them exactly what it's like? How do we develop that over in maybe short bursts? Because we don't always have the time to raise everybody else's kids, if that makes sense. Chris, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Great question. And I'm struggling trying to come up with an answer, even with my own kids, is because part of me wants to kind of shield them from the garbage of the world, because they're my baby girls. but I think it comes back to expectation, expecting my kids and then their kids and then their kids, expecting them to live at a higher standard. And that includes remembering all of the people that have allowed us to have this life and enjoy it. There's a lot of people in the world that are on the struggle bus and living in situations that are absolutely abhorrent. And we are incredibly fortunate to be where we are. And we should spend time reflecting on how grateful we should be, and all the opportunities that are afforded to us, and what those opportunities cost other people. Again, like you said, we're standing on a pile of corpses. Dude, I think you're right. The level of sacrifice and service that it took to get us to this point should be reflected on. And in addition, that in order to honor those people appropriately, I think we should expect more of ourselves and of the people around us.
Absolutely. Seb, any thoughts?
Yeah, there's so much going on, especially when we start talking about parenting, because it's an endless well, right? And there's various ways to get to the same to get to a favorable outcome. But one of the ways that I've dealt with this, so for me, I've made some mistakes. I've made lots of mistakes. And one of those mistakes was to be too transparent with what was going on in my mind, in my life, as a result of, my job and everything. So I'd be sitting in front of my house with the kids in my truck, and I'd get a call about a stabbing somewhere, and I'd be letting them listen to the radio call, and I'd be letting them, seeing me leave to go address the call. And then they would ask me a question about it, and I will tell them how it ended. And what ended up happening is because of their lack of ability to frame reality through their lens, because their brain is not fully developed, they started having a bit of anxiety in relation to the world around. And surprise, surprise, I know you're probably looking at me going, shocking. But the alternative was, and what I was thinking at the time was, I definitely don't want them to be coddled, and I definitely don't want them to be overprotected. I want them to see the world as it is so they understand the risk associated with it. And intentions being what intentions are, it didn't work out that way. And they ended up having a bit of anxiety that we needed to work through. And so, I really eased off on the sharing of absolutely every detail. And when I look back and introspected on my actions with respect to raising the girls, I was able to see that I just gave them too much information. I just went too far. What I could have done exactly the same and kept it more manageable. Now, when you look at something like how do we make them grateful? Well, we don't teach them, or we don't necessarily associate gratitude with the veterans necessarily. But what we need to be teaching them is gratitude. Like, how do we have gratitude in general? How do we have gratitude for the person that comes and clean your table after you're done at the restaurant? How do we have gratitude for the person that's, freaking brewing your coffee, whatever the case may be? You should have. And so for me, I focus more on modeling gratitude and having the conversations about, imagine, if this hadn't been done, we wouldn't have this, or we wouldn't have that, and put it into context so that at the time that it happens, I have a teaching opportunity and I take that teaching opportunity. And the goal of this for me is simply to model gratitude, but also to model where I aim the gratitude to, so that they're able to, ideally do the same. Whether that's going to be the case or not remains to be seen. But I think that we are focusing too much on, certain things and not enough on the other things, which is, what are we actually asking them to do? We're asking them to be grateful. Okay, well then teach them gratitude. And so on that, there's just a one final thing. What is it now? It was great once again.
I'm sure it was.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, this is a really interesting conversation too. And we've had this conversation before. When you look at the reality of your kids, and when you look at your life, and when you look at what you achieve, and when you look at the difficulties that got you where you are, and then you turn around and say, I want to try to avoid this for my kids, you do realize what got you here, and this is the reason why you are. The adversity that you went through and the adversity that you were able to overcome is the reason why you are here in the first place. And so if you give them all the things you didn't have, they're going to be everything you're not, right? And I think that a lot of parents, necessarily don't understand that concept. And then there is a balance between, okay, well then, do I let my kids get bullied as much as I was? Because that's a fair question. Some of them survived and got stronger. Others committed suicide. Are we going to take the gamble? And no, you can't do that. So you have to have the ability to really balance your thoughts and balance what it is that you are teaching them. Is it okay to let them experience a certain amount of sacrifice and adversity? Is it okay for me to step in now? This is kind of what parenting is all about.
100%. Dutch, any thoughts? You got to unmute yourself, brother.
I did it. We've come full circle on one thing and we come back another, and it's pretty cool. Now we're into parenting. And I should have been taking notes because there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about, obviously. To your question, how do we do this for our children? Hard work. Iron sharpening iron is hard work, right? That doesn't change. And I think this whole conversation of sacrifice, debt, service really comes back to let's go to debt. Let's go to gratitude. Who do we owe? Oh, standing on the backs of giants, dead giants. Yes, that's the only people we can say sacrifice for, or gratitude. We owe a debt of gratitude to those who are dead. Okay, so, but they're gone. They're in the grave. So let's go back to Seb or Chris. I'm not sure which one. I think is, look, you got to be the light for other people. Gratitude to just to the simple things. Yes, that's exactly right. 100%. And keep telling these kids that, guess what? We just got to keep hammering it, man. This is, it's a never ending process. It really isn't. And I think you said, go to the well, right? Is that said to go to the well of your kids, right? And it's you're never stopping trying to mold that piece of Play-Doh into a statue, right? To make it the best it can be. I should have been taking notes on everybody's talks, but it's all really good stuff when it's coming down to it. But who do we owe a debt of gratitude? The dead, those are gone now. So it's now a debt to each other to hold the fabric of the civilization that we need together. And how do we do this? We teach them, we teach them, we teach them, we teach them. The problem is, of course, today there's so many distractions, right? You've seen the guy, the talker on the street, no matter who he might be. Hey, do you know who the last president was? No, I don't. But do you know the 5 Kardashian sisters? Yes, they do. So we're so full of bread and circus as the Colosseum and the games were back in Rome. But we're just a little bit even more decadent because we have 24/7 horrible crap on your telephone right in your pocket.
Absolutely.
Can I jump in for 1 second? So just something really interesting, not interesting, but very powerful that Chris has said is in relation to, you know, how to go. When you are teaching the kids about these things, I think there is a misconception that learning is going to happen now. And with kids, because of the brain development and how it works and how long it takes them to put the pieces together, it's almost like an investment. It's almost like a banking investment where you're putting all this in and you're repeating the same messages and you're consistent in your messaging and you're doing it when it matters, and which allows them to contextualize it. And eventually life teaches them a lesson. They turn around and they have that to fall back on. I remember, you know, what my dad was saying. I remember what my mom was saying ad nauseum. And I've had this conversation with my mom before where I said to her, like, I didn't want to hear anything. And you kept on repeating the same messages. She's like, I knew that one day it would work itself into you. And I continued to be consistent with that messaging. And did it ever? Every single one of those messages is as at one point in time was a revelation for me that I was able to, you know, contextualize with what was going on in my life. And so it is not wasted time. It's an incredible investment in our future.
Bam. I like it. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
Well, as a Savannah Plains clan, I think that clan improvised, adapt, and overcame faster than we do as a society, because they were so closely connected interpersonally rather than occasional DMs. The corrections were in the real time rather than my DM tomorrow. And that one DM is just a singular point of data rather than what would have been on the Savannah Plain clan, a regular stream of consciousness. That group would have been interacting in the real time rather than in the tomorrow time. And so I think there's a real importance to the subject of how a person can learn about service and sacrifice if they're only getting it one day a year for a minute, versus if you're in the thick of it and it's 24/7 and there's no looking away, like all of us have been in. We've all served enough that, like, there's no duck dodging and diving, the 24/7-ness of it. Whereas today in the Starbucks coffee lineup, you can look at that creamer and think, I hope it's full. And if it isn't, then what am I going to do? And it's a minor blip on your radar that doesn't cement the reality of what true service and sacrifice is, because a one time per year doesn't stick. A 24/7 for 365 sticks. So next point is to add to what Seb was saying in respect to his kids and the things he may or may not have done as well as he could have or should have or would have if he had the reflection that he has now. Well, guess what? The win for all of us is that Seb has, upon reflection, come to a point where he now understands truly the importance of gratitude. And guess who he's taught gratitude to? Me. I've benefited from Seb's quote unquote, air quotes, mistake with early in his kid's life. If not for Seb running his program a way, recognizing it and then shifting it to a different way, and then maybe recognizing that, and then maybe a path down the middle, Shaun wouldn't have benefited from it. And so it's for us to recognize the service and sacrifice of others and then take them on as our, not burden, our own gift, so that we can run a better life for those others around us. That's how the clan gets better. That's how the collective gets better. Not a one data point blip one day a year.
That is a very good point. I, to your point, Dutch, earlier when you were talking about bread and circuses. We actually talked about bread and circuses last week on Philanthropy Week, and it's a really good point. Now, I have a couple of comments I just want to touch on, and then we can carry on. We might have to do final thoughts after that. But Dead Wrong jumped in here, and they said, I've seen people who sacrifice their familial affiliations for the sake of upholding the law or their faith. That's unimaginable. Now, for me, I don't think that's unimaginable, but for some people, absolutely. And then carries on with teaching plus experience equals learning. Good point. The self-contextualization is important, which I absolutely agree with. I just want to go back to this one here and get you guys' thoughts on it. The sacrificing of familial affiliations for the sake of, I mean, really anything. There's going to be a point where something becomes either negative to a degree or positive to a degree, right? If I want to change my life and my family don't want me to, but I want to better my life in a certain way, or let's say I want to join the military and my family didn't want me to. These are all things that I could see immediately of just like, too bad, I'm doing what I'm doing. What do you guys think on, sacrificing? I guess maybe the question is, how far do we go in terms of the sacrifices to get what we want or what we see as right? I think is the question. So I'm going to start with Dutch. What do you think?
Dead wrong. It's biblical, bro. You've seen people who have sacrificed their familial affiliations for the sake of upholding the law. What law, by the way, or their faith, and that's unimaginable. That's biblical, bro. Christ himself said, I will be the division. You will do, mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, parents and children will be divided because of me. So there is plenty of that, by the way. And I don't know if it's unimaginable because everyone has a story to tell. And what Chance just said too is what is it right? What's right? Is it lawful? Is it right? Certainly in this case, right? This is very generic case right here. So what if your kid brother's a meth addict and he won't stop stealing, killing, wounding people just to get what he wants, right? So we can break that familial affiliation because of the law and because of what's right? And then remove him. Yeah, he can vote himself off the tribe, bro. Whether it's a tribe in the savannah or it's a tribe in your own house, you can vote yourself off the island. And in this case, that could be the case here. I don't know what you've seen, and I know everyone has a story to tell. So what maybe happened with you is unimaginable, or could be certainly seeming unimaginable to you. It must be because you said so, but we have no idea the details of that. But there are times when that's going to happen, bro.
Absolutely. Chris, what do you think?
What is it? The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. I don't know. I'm how do I say this? I think maybe an advantage of living in the time that we are living is that you, if necessary, you do have that luxury of walking away from people in your circle or life that are no longer serving a better or higher purpose. Kind of case in point, like my stepmom has never even met my kids, and it didn't come to any of my like military graduations and stuff like that, and that's okay. I'm not even brokenhearted about that. It's more just like I'm okay stepping away from that affiliation, because I want my kids to be healthy and happy and fulfilled in their own life, and that had less to do with faith and law, but maybe as I view higher purpose and right living, maybe that is the faith in question here, and so I don't think it's necessarily unimaginable. And like I said, we're not living on the savannah anymore. I don't have to stay within that tribe if it's not serving me anymore. I can walk away. I think it can be a double-edged sword, though, because people, if they just don't like what they're hearing, or if they're just like, well, dad's too strict, I'm going to walk away, that possibility is there too. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question fully, but yeah, I'm okay with it sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Seb, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm down the same vein. I mean, run of the mill, this wouldn't be something that's preferable, and you would want to do everything you can within your power to make a family relationship work, right? Like, and whatever sacrifice is needed to accomplish this, you obviously you're going to try to take that route first. But what we're seeing often, and I've seen it with a bunch of my clients as well, I'm sure everybody else on the panel has, is where people are now putting so much weight on a blood affiliation that they don't realize that that person is the number one enemy and culprit that's keeping them exactly where they don't want to be, right? And now the only thing that's keeping them there is that family relationship that they absolutely do not want to break. That's a blatant inversion of the priorities of life. I don't care. Like, it just, if you look at it from a decision-making perspective, you just inverted the priorities of life. Like, you've put yourself down the ladder, and you've prioritized some other concept, some other obscure concept, which is not based in necessarily in reality, more an emotional state. And now you're making decisions, despite the fact that what's best for you and how to go about, dealing with that. So I think it's important to recognize that blood affiliation or family affiliation does not mean a green card to do whatever the hell you want to other people around you, or to act whatever you want, or to and if you think that you can act unimpeded and never suffer consequences from that, I think you got a surprise coming, and that's imaginable. Now, what's unimaginable is if the person has made no effort to try to bridge a relationship, or, to try to understand other people's point of view within the context of a family or whatever. I'm going to always give more time and attention to the people within the confines of the family, just to make sure that we're not at odds for a stupid reason. And that's something that's articulable. Yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Shaun, got any thoughts on it?
Oh yeah, I'm with the rest of the panel. I think maybe it's a middle ground, or maybe I'm a little further off to the side, in the sense that not only is it imaginable, it is reality that this occurs, and it shouldn't be held on such a pedestal that I'll never go there, because then you've got a blind spot. If you draw a line in the sand and say that, well, that's unimaginable. So if you're doing that for yourself, if you're serving yourself and you've made that rule for yourself that you will never cross that line because it's unimaginable, well, that's one thing. But if you're serving a greater good, if you're serving the tribe around you, if you're serving the Savannah clan, if you're serving the collective, if you're serving your modern fellow man, there's going to be times today or in the near future where the unimaginable is going to have to become imaginable. And so for the single soul journey, perhaps this sentence has some sense of, I understand the spirit of it, but I think in the modern world, what we're really facing right now is, if you're serving yourself, that's one thing, but if you're serving the greater good, it's an entirely different conversation.
Absolutely. They hit us back real quick afterwards. They said, thank you again. I think I meant unimaginably difficult for me, but I understand better now. So I think that's great. That's great. We are just a little bit over an hour right now. This has been just an absolutely fantastic conversation. I really do appreciate it. So let's get some final thoughts on service and sacrifice, or anything else that we've gone over today, which has been quite a lot. So I really do appreciate the conversation. Everybody, it's been fantastic. Oh, look at that. We got Achilles there. Solid. So let's start with Dutch. Final thoughts.
First and foremost, thanks again for allowing me the opportunity to yap and to talk to you, awesome professionals on this platform. I don't know if I have anything else that's earth shattering. It's for folks out there. Look, none of it's easy. Some of the stuff that we've already gone over. I'll just quickly try to do an executive summary. Everyone has a story to tell. Be better to your fellow man. Are there times where there's arguments? Are there times, obviously there's political issues, there's arguments, there's all kinds of stuff. Gather information, do your own homework, be a critical thinker. Service When you say service, serve to other people. Yes, why not serve to other people, right? We're better collectively if we serve to other people. And then when you do decide to serve the government in some sort of way, whether it's local, school, county, state, province, and then federal service, do your utmost, work as hard as you can. And in the beginning, what Seb said, know exactly what you're getting into, understand the mission, and go forth and do great things.
Bam. Chris, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think the last thing is don't be afraid of sacrifice if you can change the perception of it as an early investment to future greatness, whether in your own life or even in future generations' lives. I think that's don't be afraid of that sacrifice, because that's a good sacrifice. And then I think the last bit is surround yourself with people that expect a great deal of you and also expect a great deal of them. I think that'd be it.
Bam. Just fire, guys. Seb, final thoughts?
Just switch the lens by which you view the world. Think about something that I believe Dutch said earlier, or maybe it was Chris, about social media. It was Chris. I think we called it social media, but really it's as far as it can be from creating any social bonds, really. And I'll disagree with that to an extent, because it does bring people together, but it also does isolate people a lot. But today at this very time in my life, this was the first time that I didn't take social media, those two words together, at face value, because somebody said it actually does the opposite, and I'm like, wait a minute, that is accurate, that is true. And so how many more things like this do we continue to take for granted to be exactly how they're described to be, and never seek to look deeper, and this is something that I generally pride myself on, and I'm happy I got caught with my pants down. But I would say, whatever it is that experience wise, or whatever it is that that you've heard about sacrifice, the sacrifice of others, or whatever the case may be, really try to live it through every sense you have, not just through a sanitized 2D sort of version, like you're reading it on a paper, but it means nothing because there's absolutely no emotional reaction attached to that. Try to view life, try to put yourself in the shoes. And that includes, the sides, and just change your lens.
Absolutely. Shaun, final thoughts?
It popped into my head just now, and we had a little bit of a laugh about it when I was back in Australia 24 hours ago with the two Canadian national athletes. And we were actually talking about contextuality of sacrifice, because as 24-hour solo mountain bike racers, it's harder than walking into a Starbucks coffee shop. And so you've got to do hard things to understand sacrifice, and you've got to do a lot of service to understand service. But if you don't have the context, you think you're making all the sacrifices in the world. So here's the funny story. If you haven't seen the David Beckham and Victoria little video, they were in a documentary, I believe, and she's sitting on the couch and she's being interviewed, and David Beckham is out of camera. And so the interviewer says, so tell us a little bit about your family history. And she says, oh, I had a really humble upbringing. We were really humble, really, we didn't have much, and yada, yada, yada. And then the door swings open. David Beckham pops his head out and he says, what? And she says, well, and he says, so what car did your dad drive? And she says, well, we had it. And it kind of rambles on, and she goes back and forth. And he just keeps holding his line like, so what was the car? Your humble upbringing, what was the car? What did your dad pick you up? What car? And finally she says, oh, she rolls her eyes. It was a Rolls Royce. And then he just closes the door and he's out of camera. I mean, if you haven't seen the video, go find the video. Context. If you think that you've had a hard life because the Rolls Royce hadn't had a tune that day, well, yeah, your life is hard, man. Your life is hard. If you run out of creamer at Starbucks, guess what? Contextually, the world is tough. Your life is hard. The people who believe that their life is hard and they haven't led a hard life don't understand sacrifice and service. And so back to my original point on the poppy with Simon, and how that entire class couldn't understand the value of the poppy or what it truly represents. maybe on your drive to Starbucks in your Rolls Royce, you can think about these things.
Bam. Calling it out. I like it. Mic drops anyway. I also have a little story that I want to tell just as a final thought here. So while I was giving my Remembrance Day talk at the school the other day, and this is what I've done a couple of times at the few times that I've actually given this speech, is I talk about my friends. I tell the kids who they were as people, so they don't just see them as soldiers in uniform. They don't just see them with the flag draped coffins. They don't just see the fact that the poppy is something that it's like a responsibility and you just have to wear it. And okay, well, now we're just going to wear my poppy every day because it has to be done. And I tell them specifically little tidbits about them. Shaun had perfect hair and Dustin loved his coffee. Little things to humanize it so that the kids can then connect with those people as people and then understand that they sacrificed for the kids, for each other, for the greater good, for the country, for everything else. And that way the kids get a chance to learn about my friends, and then they can build upon that understanding to flesh out their idea of what a sacrifice is, and then they can grow into being worthy of that sacrifice. And that's something you can do every day with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
Chimo.